Imagine two people walking into the same job interview. Both studied English for 10 years. Both passed the same exams. Both know the same grammar rules. But the moment they open their mouths, everything changes. One person speaks with confidence, warmth, and clarity. The other hesitates, stumbles, and apologizes for every small mistake. Here's the question. What is the real difference between them? It's not vocabulary, it's not grammar, and it's definitely not their level of education. The difference is something deeper, something that most English teachers never talk about in the classroom. And today, we are going to unpack exactly what that difference is. Welcome back to the show. If you're listening to this, you are already doing something that most English learners never do. You are choosing to immerse yourself in real, natural English. That choice right there is exactly the kind of habit that fluent speakers build every single day. So take a breath, get comfortable, and let's dive in. Today's episode, how successful people speak English habits, patterns, and the mindset of fluent speakers. This is your advanced English listening practice, your daily English conversation practice, and your complete guide to thinking like a fluent speaker. Welcome back to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel.
Oh, it is just undeniably fantastic to be exploring this with you today. Because what we are really doing here is, well, we're completely dismantling the traditional approach to language learning.
Right.
We're flipping it entirely on its head.
Absolutely. The core mission for our conversation today, our whole deep dive, is to essentially take a wrecking ball to this massive, really intimidating myth, what we might call textbook fluency.
Spot on. That illusion.
Yeah, you know the illusion I'm talking about. The idea that for you to be truly fluent, you must possess like zero accent. You must never make a single grammatical error.
Right.
And you need to have a vocabulary that basically rivals a walking dictionary. And, well, we are tossing that entire concept out the window today.
Riddance to it, too, honestly. Because that foundational premise, that idea of perfection, is where everything goes wrong for so many bright, really capable people. Real fluency, and we need to stress this, has absolutely nothing to do with perfection. It doesn't. Real fluency is about connection. Yeah. I mean, if you are sitting in a high-stakes strategy meeting in New York, or, you're at a networking mixer in London.
Or even just a Zoom call, right?
Right. A tricky Zoom call with an international team spread across, 3 different time zones. Your ability to connect naturally is what actually shapes your career.
It builds the trust.
Without a doubt, it builds trust. Perfection is an illusion.
Yeah.
I mean, native speakers make mistakes all day long.
Oh, yeah.
They pause, they completely lose their train of thought, and say, they figure out what to say next.
Which we're probably doing right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they still connect, and that's the key.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I think before we can even begin to talk about how you physically speak more fluently, the mechanics, the vocabulary, the vocal training, all of that, we have to look at the invisible psychological walls that are standing in your way.
Oh, yes. The mental game.
Exactly. It's all happening in the mind first, right? Because if you're terrified to even open your mouth, all the vocabulary in the world won't help you.
Undeniably. The biggest barrier for almost everyone listening isn't a lack of vocabulary. It's actually a psychological and neurological phenomenon. In linguistics, it's known as the monitor hypothesis.
The monitor hypothesis, that sounds pretty intense. What is actually happening in the brain when this kicks in?
So imagine you have a tiny, overly strict, incredibly pedantic editor living inside your brain.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Little guy with a red pen.
Spot on. The red pen is out. And every single time you want to speak a thought out loud, this editor blows a whistle and demands to check the sentence first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you formulate a thought, and before your mouth is even allowed to move, the editor is just running down a checklist. It checks the verb tense. Is it past perfect or simple past?
Oh, it's a dread.
Right. It checks the prepositions. Should it be in or on? It checks if you're using the most optimal, sophisticated vocabulary word.
I can literally feel the anxiety just hearing you describe that process. It sounds absolutely exhausting.
It is paralyzing.
Yeah.
And it causes immense physiological anxiety. You start to sweat, your heart rate elevates, because, well, here's the brutal reality of a live conversation. By the time this internal editor finally stamps its approval on your sentence, the conversation has already moved on.
The moment is just gone.
The moment is gone. You missed your window.
Or, what happens to me sometimes when I'm trying to speak another language, you finally do speak, but the delivery is so stilted and robotic.
Yes.
Because you've essentially over-rehearsed a 10-word sentence in your head. It creates this physical tension. You look uncomfortable, so the person you're talking to feels uncomfortable. It ruins the natural flow.
That is absolutely correct. And that is why the very first habit of highly successful English communicators is that they fundamentally shift their goal.
Shift it to what?
They prioritize clarity over perfection. The singular goal of communication, at its core, is just to transfer an idea from your brain into someone else's brain.
Yeah.
To just be understood.
There's a brilliant case study I was reading recently that illustrates this perfectly. It involves a non-native English speaker, let's call him Ravi, and a native-speaking project manager named Sarah.
Ah, yes. The extension request.
Right. It's a completely standard corporate scenario.
Right.
Ravi needs to ask for more time on a deliverable. So Ravi realizes the deadline is too tight. And he says something to Sarah along the lines of, I'm not sure if I explained correct, but basically, our team need more time for finish the project.
Right.
Our team need more time for finish. Now, grammatically speaking, if you submitted that on an English exam, the teacher's red pen would be everywhere.
It would be a mess.
The internal editor in Ravi's head is probably screaming.
Yeah.
But how does Sarah, the native speaker, actually respond?
Yeah.
She doesn't pull out a grammar book. She says, totally get it. So you're asking for an extension. Ravi says yes. Boom.
Boom. The communication was 100% successful.
Spot on.
And let's analyze why it was successful.
Yeah.
Sarah does not care about Robbie's verb conjugation or his missing prepositions.
No.
Sarah is a professional trying to manage a complex project. She has, a million things on her plate. She just needs to know the facts. Does Robbie's team need more time? Yes. Can she adjust the timeline? Yes. The goal was achieved.
Right.
Successful communicators make peace with imperfection because they know they only need to ask themselves one fundamental question at the end of an interaction. Did the other person understand my core message? If the answer is yes, you win. The interaction was a success.
This plays right into another huge psychological habit we need to talk about, I think, the fear of making mistakes. I read a fascinating breakdown of how learners generally fall into two categories, performers and practitioners.
Oh, that is such a crucial distinction to make.
And realizing which one you are can completely change your trajectory.
Without a doubt, performers view every single conversation as a high-stakes test. To them, they are standing on a stage, a blinding spotlight is shining directly on them, and an audience is waiting to judge them.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. They are terrified of failing, of looking foolish, of losing status.
Which means they play it safe. They only say things they know are completely correct, which severely limits their expression, or, they just stay quiet.
Undeniably. Practitioners, on the other hand, view the world entirely differently. They view every conversation not as a stage, but as a laboratory.
A laboratory, I love that.
They embrace failure. They understand that language is a messy, iterative process. From a purely neurological standpoint, every time a practitioner makes a mistake and they notice it, or someone gently asks them to clarify, their brain literally builds a stronger, thicker neural pathway.
So the mistake is actually the tool.
Absolutely. You absolutely need those mistakes to forge the physical connections in your brain that eventually lead to effortless fluency.
It really is the ego. We have to be willing to drop our ego to protect our progress. If you're constantly trying to look smart, you will just never get fluent. But here's the thing that really trips people up, and I think it's the root cause of that ego protection. It's the native speaker comparison trap. People are constantly comparing their own halting speech to someone who has been immersed in English since they were in diapers.
Which is an incredibly damaging and, frankly, irrational mindset. It sets a completely impossible benchmark that only leads to frustration.
Right. I always think of it like this. Imagine someone who just decided they want to get in shape. They go to the store, they buy their very first pair of jogging shoes, they stretch, and they head down to the local track.
Okay.
Then they pull out a stopwatch and compare their first 5K time to an Olympic marathon champion.
That's hilarious.
It's absurd. It's not just unfair to you, it's completely useless data. Why on earth are you measuring yourself against someone who is participating in a completely different reality?
That is a wonderful analogy. It highlights the absurdity perfectly. And to push that analogy even further, to really examine the reality of that Olympic runner, the native speaker, they aren't even running a perfect race.
What do you mean?
Well, if we look closely at why textbook grammar should never be a gatekeeper in real-world conversation, we find that native speakers break the rules constantly. every single day.
Oh, that's so true.
You will routinely hear highly educated native speakers say things like, me and my friend went to the store, instead of my friend and I. Or they'll say, that's so different than I expected, instead of different from.
Right, which would get a big red X on a test.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Grammatically, a textbook would reject those sentences. But culturally, contextually, within the flow of human interaction, it is perfectly accepted. No one blinks an eye.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Please do.
Because I can almost hear you listening to this right now, shouting at your screen or your headphones. But wait, if we just ignore grammar and say whatever comes to mind, don't we risk sounding uneducated or unprofessional? What if I am in a high-stakes business meeting with a CEO or pitching a client for a massive contract? I can't just stumble around.
It is a completely valid fear, and it's one of the most common anxieties in the corporate world. But we have to separate formal written communication from conversational trust building.
Two different arenas.
Entirely different mediums. If you are writing a legal contract or drafting a formal public relations press release or sending an official proposal, yes, grammar matters immensely.
Sure.
In print, perfection is expected. But in a conversational setting, even a terrifyingly high-stakes one with a CEO, authority and warmth do not come from perfect syntax. They come from your tone, your eye contact, your confidence, and the clarity of your underlying thought.
So the substance outweighs the packaging.
Without a doubt. Think about it realistically. If you stumble over a preposition or use the wrong tense for a split second, but you immediately deliver a brilliant, highly profitable strategic insight with absolute confidence, what is that CEO going to remember?
The money.
Spot on. They are going to remember the insight that saves the company money. They're not going to remember the preposition. Trust is built through human connection, problem solving, and shared goals, not through grammatical sterility.
Grammatical sterility. I love that phrase.
Okay.
Let's unpack this next phase. So we've dropped the fear of perfection. We've fired that strict little editor in our brain.
Or gone.
We are officially practitioners in the laboratory. Once we do that, the very next step is fundamentally changing how the brain processes the language itself. We need to rewire the machinery, and that requires a shift towards something called automaticity.
This is truly where the magic happens for language learners.
Yeah.
This is the bridge between intermediate and advanced. The second major habit of successful speakers is that they train themselves to think directly in English, completely bypassing the urge to translate.
The translation step. It's the classic trap, isn't it? You're in a conversation. You hear a question. First, you process it.
Right.
Then you formulate your brilliant answer in your native language, say Arabic or Japanese or Spanish. Then you mentally drag that thought across a dictionary in your head, translating it word for word into English. And then finally you speak it out loud.
Which is exactly why people often feel completely wiped out, just physically exhausted after a 30-minute conversation in English.
Brain drain.
It is. You aren't just having a conversation. You're doing double the cognitive work of everyone else in the room. You are acting as a live, simultaneous interpreter for your own brain.
That sounds like a terrible job.
It's awful. You are processing two entirely different linguistic operating systems at the exact same time. Fluent speakers skip that middle step entirely.
How so?
When a fluent speaker sees a cup of coffee on a desk, they don't look at it, think of the word in their native language, and then mentally convert it. The visual concept of that hot, dark beverage maps directly to the English word coffee in their brain instantly.
There's an incredible story I came across about a Korean language learner that highlights the power of this.
Oh, tell me.
So this student was incredibly frustrated. They had a great vocabulary, but they spoke very slowly because they translated every single sentence. So they decided to try an experiment. They started forcing themselves to think in English for the lowest stakes, most mundane things possible in their daily life.
Oh, brilliant.
Right. We're talking about writing their weekly grocery lists in English, jotting down quick to-do notes on Post-its at their desk, thinking about what they wanted for dinner. And within 3 months, just 3 months, their speaking speed in actual conversations doubled.
Wow.
Literally doubled, just from changing how they thought about milk and eggs.
It works so quickly because it's about daily, low-pressure immersion. It's about building that automaticity. Let's look at it from a neurological standpoint because the science here is fascinating.
I love the science part.
When you are translating, you're using the brain's slow, highly analytical center, the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
This is the same part of the brain you use to solve complex math equations or figure out a difficult puzzle.
Right, it takes effort.
It requires intense focus and energy. But when you practice mundane repetition, like the grocery list, you are slowly moving the language processing away from the prefrontal cortex and shifting it over to the fast, intuitive center of the brain.
Which is the basal ganglia, right? That's where our habits live.
Spot on. It's the habit center. It operates almost automatically, without conscious thought. When you force yourself to think of a grocery list in English, you're carving a mental groove, greasing the wheels of that neural pathway. Over time, the basal ganglia takes over, so you don't have to consciously think about the language anymore. It just arrives.
It makes me think of the process of learning to drive a manual transmission car, a stick shift. Do you remember the very first time you sat behind the wheel of a manual car?
Oh, it was utterly terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying. You are sitting there sweating, you are thinking about the clutch pedal, you are staring obsessively at the RPM gauge to see when to shift, you are physically feeling the gear shift in your hand, and you are petrified of stalling the car at a red light while people honk at you. Your brain's prefrontal cortex is completely maxed out, just operating the machinery of the vehicle. If the passenger tries to ask you a question, or a song comes on the radio, you can't even process it.
Because the cognitive load is at 100% capacity.
Exactly. But what happens after a year of driving that exact same car? You are cruising down the highway, you're drinking a coffee, you're singing along to the radio, you're having a deep conversation with your passenger, and you don't even remember shifting from third to fourth gear.
It's magic.
Your foot just knows what to do. The car has become an extension of your physical body.
That is the perfect definition of automaticity.
Yeah.
You no longer think about the mechanics of driving, you just think about your destination. In English, when you achieve automaticity, you no longer think about the mechanics of the grammar or the vocabulary retrieval. You just think about the idea you want to share, and the words simply appear to carry you there.
So, the million-dollar question. How do you get there? How does a busy person who doesn't live in London or New York build this automaticity? Linguists have actually mapped out what they call a daily menu for immersion, and I think it is brilliant because it proves you don't need to pack up your life and move to an English-speaking country to surround yourself with the language.
Not at all. You can architect a highly effective English immersion environment anywhere in the world, right from your smartphone and your daily routine.
So what's on the menu?
The daily menu breaks down like this, and it's designed to touch different parts of your brain throughout the day. First, in the morning while you're getting ready, you listen to just 10 minutes of an English podcast or news broadcast. Not to study it intensely, but just to tune your ear to the natural rhythm and cadence of the language while you brush your teeth.
Setting the musical baselines of the day?
Spot on. Then, during your commute, whether you are driving, on a train, or walking, you practice inner monologue. You silently narrate your surroundings or your plans for the day in your head in English. I need to grab a coffee before the 10 a.m. meeting.
Okay, I like that.
Then at lunch, you take out a notebook and write just 3 to 5 sentences in an English journal. Just a quick reflection.
And writing is so powerful because it bridges that gap between thought and physical output, but without the pressure of someone waiting for you to speak.
Undeniably. Then in the evening, when you want to relax, you watch one episode of a TV show, but the crucial rule is absolutely no subtitles. Not even English subtitles.
That's tough for some people.
It is, but you force your brain to rely purely on audio and visual context, just like in real life. Finally, right before sleep, as your brain is preparing to consolidate memories, you review 2 new phrases, not single words, but phrases that you encountered that day.
It's so simple. None of those steps takes more than 10 or 20 minutes. But the compound interest on that routine over 6 months is astronomical. It's constant, low-pressure, high-frequency exposure.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now your brain is starting to think directly in English. The gears are shifting automatically. You aren't translating. Now we have to talk about how we physically deliver those thoughts out of our mouths and into the room. And this is where we dive into the mechanics of speech. Speed, simplicity, and the profound power of storytelling.
And this brings us face to face with a massive paradox that trips up so many eager language learners.
Yes, the speed trap. The deep-seated belief that speaking faster automatically makes you sound more fluent.
It is a complete and utter myth. In fact, speed is often the enemy of clarity. So many learners want to emulate the fast-talking characters they see in movies, or they rush because they feel nervous and just want to get the words out as quickly as possible.
Right, get it over with.
Exactly. But when you rush, your pronunciation suffers immensely. You start dropping the endings of your words. You blur consonants together in ways that aren't natural. And as a result, The person listening to you has to work twice as hard to decode what you are saying.
That sounds uncomfortable for everyone.
It treats this subtle, uncomfortable friction in the conversation. The listener feels tense because they are straining to understand you.
So the counterintuitive habit is slow and clear. Look at university professors or successful executives giving TED Talks or world leaders. They don't race through their sentences. They take their time. They pause. They let the words breathe.
Yes.
They use silence as a tool. And ironically, deliberately slowing down makes you sound significantly more intelligent, more confident, and vastly more fluent.
Because slowing down communicates authority and control. When you speak slowly, you are subconsciously signaling to the room, I am comfortable taking up space and time. What I have to say is worth waiting for. And practically speaking, slowing down gives your brain that crucial microsecond it needs to retrieve the right vocabulary, which allows you to utilize another vital habit, relying on simple, universal vocabulary with absolute confidence.
Here's where it gets really interesting, Frenny. Because we are conditioned by academia to believe that to be impressive, we need to swallow a thesaurus. We think we need to use massive, multi-syllable words to prove we belong in the room.
It's a huge misconception.
But if you analyze the most memorable, impactful communicators in history, they rely heavily on simple, universal words. Look at Martin Luther King Jr., arguably one of the greatest orators of the 20th century. He didn't stand on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and say, I harbor a somnolent aspiration for the future.
No, he did not.
He used 4 of the simplest words in the English language. I have a dream.
Or look at the business world. Look at Steve Jobs. When he introduced the first Apple products that revolutionized global technology, he didn't use hyper-complex engineering jargon to sell them to the public.
Right.
He didn't talk about microprocessing speeds and motherboard architecture. He called the products insanely great. 2 incredibly simple words. But the power isn't in the complexity of the syllables. It's in the intention and the clarity behind them. From a cognitive perspective, simple words are processed much faster by the listener's brain. There is zero friction, which means your core message hits their emotions with much more impact.
I love that point, but I'm going to push back again here because I know there are listeners thinking about their specific careers. Let's say I'm a senior software engineer or a financial analyst or a medical researcher. Won't I sound uneducated or out of my depth if I don't use big, highly technical words to describe my daily work?
It is a very common fear, especially in specialized industries.
Yeah.
But we have to fundamentally redefine what true mastery actually looks like. True mastery isn't the ability to memorize a textbook. True mastery is the ability to take something wildly complex and make it accessible to anyone. If you constantly hide behind big, convoluted jargon, people don't think you're a genius. They often assume you don't actually understand the core mechanics of what you're talking about, or worse, that you're trying to compensate for a lack of true insight.
Oh, that's a brilliant point.
The most universally respected professionals in any field are the ones who can explain a highly technical concept using a universal analogy. Now, occasionally, you might actually forget a specific necessary word in the middle of a sentence.
It happens to the best of us.
And that is where the linguistic skill of circumlocution comes in.
Circumlocution, literally talking around the word.
Absolutely. It's a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Let's say you were in a meeting and your brain just completely drops the word stapler. Yeah. You know it, but it's gone. A performer would freeze, panic, apologize, and derail the whole meeting trying to remember it.
I'm so sorry, my English is bad.
Exactly. A practitioner uses circumlocution. They just smoothly say, can you hand me that little device we use to push the metal clips through the paper? Everyone knows exactly what you mean. Someone hands you the stapler, and the meeting continues without a single bump. Fluent speakers do this effortlessly. They don't let a missing piece of vocabulary destroy the entire thought.
It's all about keeping the momentum going. But let's talk about the emotional weight of words, too, because when we say, keep it simple, some people might interpret that as keep it boring, but using simple words doesn't mean you should sound like a robot. There's a habit of highly fluent speakers that involves actively upgrading emotional expressions.
That's a vital distinction. Language isn't just a USB drive transferring raw data from one computer to another. It's a medium for transferring feeling, energy, and perspective. If someone asks you how a massive high-stakes meeting with a client went, and you reply, the meeting was good, it was successful, I am happy, you sound like a spreadsheet.
A very boring, very dry spreadsheet. You conveyed the data, but you didn't convey the reality.
Spot on. But if you upgrade those simple words slightly to carry genuine emotion, the entire dynamic of the conversation changes. Instead of saying the meeting was good, you say you were blown away by the team's effort.
Nice.
Instead of calling the client's proposal interesting, you describe it as thought-provoking. Instead of saying you are happy, you say you are thrilled or deeply relieved. You are essentially painting your sentences in rich color instead of flat black and white.
Just imagine the difference in tone. Honestly, the meeting went really well. The team was amazing. Just adding those subtle emotional markers makes the listener lean in. It makes you sound deeply human and invested. And speaking of making people lean in, that perfectly sets up one of the most powerful habits of all, storytelling.
Stories are the ultimate universal language of human connection. If you want people to remember you, whether you're at a crowded networking event or delivering a keynote presentation, you do not hand them a bulleted list of facts about your life. You wrap those facts in a narrative arc.
And thankfully, you don't have to be a novelist to do this. There is a very specific learnable formula for this, often used in executive coaching. It's called the SPAR formula.
Right.
SPAR, situation, problem, action, result. I saw a fantastic breakdown of how this transforms a standard job interview.
Yeah, so let's walk through that because it's so practical. The interviewer asks the classic, slightly intimidating question. Tell me about a time you handled a difficult situation.
Now, a nervous candidate might just say, I am very good under pressure, and I always try to solve problems as fast as I can to help the company, which is nice, but it's completely forgettable. It's just a claim.
It's empty.
Right. Instead, the fluent communicator used the SPAR framework to prove it. First, the situation. A couple of years ago, I was the lead on a major software launch. Then the problem. 2 weeks before our final deadline, our main third-party supplier pulled out completely. The entire team was panicking because the timeline seemed ruined.
Oh, the tension.
Then, the action. I called an emergency huddle, mapped out 3 alternative vendors, and within 48 hours, I had negotiated a rush contract with a new supplier. Finally, the result. We delivered the project on time, and honestly, it fundamentally taught me that problems are just puzzles you haven't solved yet.
That answer is an absolute masterclass in professional communication.
Oh.
It demonstrates leadership, grace under pressure, and strategic thinking, all without ever explicitly bragging. And let's analyze the deep psychology of why that story sticks in the interviewer's memory while a list of skills fades away instantly.
Let's do it.
Evolutionarily speaking, our human brains are hardwired for narrative. For tens of thousands of years before written language or PowerPoint existed, stories told around campfires were how we survived as a species.
Wow.
It was how we passed down crucial information about where the danger was and where the food was. When you tell a well-structured story, something incredible happens in the room. The listener's brainwaves actually begin to physically synchronize with your brainwaves.
Are you serious?
Yes. It's a documented neurological phenomenon called neural coupling. You are literally commanding the room's attention by tapping into their ancient evolutionary biology.
Neural coupling. So when you tell a story, you are literally syncing up your brain with the person across the table. That is unbelievable. And what a closing line from that candidate, too. Problems are just unsolved puzzles.
Great line.
Okay, so we've established the foundation. We've got the simple words. We know how to inject emotional color. And we have the SPAR formula for storytelling. But how do we string all of this together quickly in real time when the pressure's on? We don't have time to painstakingly build every sentence word by word. That takes us to the concept of linguistic architecture. This is where we explore chunking, phrases, and patterns.
This is a massive leap forward for learners. The habit here is utilizing sentence patterns, or what cognitive linguists call chunking. Highly fluent speakers do not build every single sentence from scratch, retrieving individual words from a mental dictionary one by one.
That would be exhausting.
That process would require far too much cognitive load to maintain a fast-paced conversation. Instead, they rely heavily on pre-built linguistic blocks.
I always think of this like building a house. Let's say you want to build a brick house. You don't go out to a clay pit, dig up the dirt, fire up a kiln, and bake every single individual brick from scratch before you lay it down. If you did that, it would take you a decade to build one wall.
You'd never finish.
Instead, you go to a supplier and you buy pre-made bricks delivered on huge pallets ready to go. Because you have the bricks ready, you can focus all your mental energy on the architecture, the design of the house, where the windows should go, how the rooms flow together.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. In language, those pre-made bricks are high-frequency conversational frames. We're talking about phrases like, From my perspective, or what I've consistently noticed is, or let me give you a quick example of what I mean.
Right.
When you have these chunks deeply loaded into your muscle memory, your mouth goes on autopilot for the first half of the sentence. You just say the phrase. And while your mouth is delivering those words, it gives your brain a crucial split-second window to formulate the actual substance of the second half of the sentence.
It drastically reduces the real-time pressure. You're buying yourself runway. And this seamlessly ties into another crucial concept, which is prioritizing learning full phrases over isolated words to avoid falling into the phrase gap.
The phrase gap is a massive pitfall, and traditional schooling often encourages it. You memorize a list of 50 vocabulary words for a test, but you don't learn anything about the ecosystem that surrounds those words in the real world. Let's take a very simple, everyday word like deal.
Right. Deal. D-E-A-L, a very common word in business and life.
If you only know the direct dictionary translation of the word deal, you are missing out on a vast linguistic ecosystem. Fluent speakers understand collocations, the words that naturally and habitually hang out together. Think about how many ways we use it.
Oh, there are so many.
You have to deal with a problem when things go wrong. You try to make a deal in a negotiation. A certain condition might be a deal breaker for you. Or informally, you might ask a friend, what's the deal with that guy?
Yeah.
Each of these phrases carries a totally different tone, context, and grammatical structure. In English, you don't do a decision, you make a decision. You don't make your homework, you do your homework. This invisible grammar of collocations is what truly makes someone sound deeply natural and fluent. You have to learn the word in its natural habitat.
Okay, so we talked extensively about keeping your vocabulary simple and accessible earlier, but there's a time and a place for precision. And I want to dive into some specific advanced vocabulary, high-leverage power words that can genuinely elevate your presence in a professional conversation. Let's really analyze a few of these, because having a curated handful of these in your back pocket can completely change how people perceive your authority.
Absolutely. While simple is usually best, having a few precision tools in your belt is incredibly powerful. Let's look at the word pragmatic. This is a fantastic word for the corporate world. It means being highly practical, focused on tangible results and realistic solutions rather than theoretical ideas or emotion.
Let's put that in a scenario. Imagine you're in a meeting and the marketing team is coming up with wildly expensive, unrealistic ideas for a campaign. The room is getting stressed. If you step in and say, these are great creative ideas, but let's take a pragmatic approach for Q3, you instantly change the power dynamic.
Yes, you do.
You suddenly sound grounded. You sound like the realistic adult in the room who is protecting the budget. It establishes immediate leadership.
Without a doubt. Another brilliant word to deploy is nuanced. When a situation or an argument is nuanced, it means there are subtle differences, fine details, or multiple layers of complexity. It's not just black and white.
I use this one a lot when I want to validate someone but also disagree with them. If a colleague presents a very rigid view on a competitor, you can say, I agree with your broad point, but I think their pricing strategy is a bit more nuanced than that. It shows that you appreciate complexity. You aren't calling them wrong. You are elevating the discussion to a higher intellectual level.
Spot on. It invites deeper analysis rather than conflict. Another incredibly powerful word in modern leadership is empathy. This means actively understanding and sharing the feelings of another person.
That's a big one right now.
It is. In the past, business was all about ruthless efficiency. Now, the best managers say things like, we need to lead this transition with empathy for the team's workload. It's such a warm, deeply human word to bring into a corporate setting. It shows emotional intelligence, which is a massive marker of a successful communicator.
And let's look at one more, resonate. This is huge in communication and marketing, but also just in daily connection. To resonate means to have a strong, lingering, positive effect on someone, to feel deeply true to their experience.
It is a beautiful word for building rapport. If someone shares a vulnerable story or a big idea, and you reply with, wow, that story really resonated with me, it is a profound compliment.
It really is.
It is a fantastic way to validate them. It shows you aren't just passively hearing their audio frequencies, you are actively feeling the impact of their words on a personal level.
And along with those power words, fluent speakers rely on what we can call navigational phrases. These are chumps that help you steer a conversation safely, especially when there's friction. For example, opening a difficult statement with, Let me be entirely transparent about this.
Oh, that's a good one.
It instantly signals honesty, it shows vulnerability, and it immediately lowers the listener's defensive walls before you deliver bad news. Or, one of my absolute favorites from meetings, I'd push back on that slightly.
Oh, that is a phenomenal phrase. I'd push back on that slightly. Think about the psychology there. It allows you to disagree with someone politely, yet firmly. It completely removes the aggressive sting of saying, "You're wrong," or "I disagree." It sounds collaborative, almost physical, like you are gently steering a shared project back on course. You are navigating the flow of ideas safely without bruising anyone's ego.
So what does this all mean when we put two human beings in a room together? Because ultimately, communication isn't a monologue. You aren't just giving a speech to a wall. True fluency is rigorously tested in how we interact with others dynamically in real time, which brings us to the core of connection, the two-way street.
This is where we have to fundamentally shift the focus outward. One of the most overlooked habits of fluent speakers is active listening. The profound truth is, getting better at English or any language isn't just about practicing how to speak more. It is deeply about learning how to listen better.
And if we're being completely honest, most of us are terrible listeners, truly terrible. When the other person is talking, we aren't actually absorbing their meaning. We are just politely waiting for our turn to speak. The entire time their mouth is moving, we are frantically formulating our own brilliant response in our heads, which means we aren't actually present in the conversation.
And doing that destroys the illusion of fluency. Because when you are in your own head preparing a script and the person finally stops talking, your prepackaged response is often slightly disconnected from the reality of the moment. You miss the nuance. Fluent speakers, on the other hand, fully process what is said before they even begin to prepare a response.
How do they do that without awkward pauses?
They rely on active listening phrases to buy themselves cognitive processing time while simultaneously validating the speaker. They will nod and say, "Interesting, so what you're saying is," and briefly summarize the point, or "I see exactly what you mean."
And they ask questions. That is such a vital habit. The strategic use of open-ended questions, things like, "What's your take on this?" or "How did that whole situation turn out for you?"
Questions are the ultimate conversational multi-tool. First, they build immense rapport because people love to be asked for their opinion. Second, they deepen the interaction past surface-level small talk. And third, and this is absolutely crucial for a language learner, they take the spotlight and the pressure completely off of you.
Such a relief.
If you feel your vocabulary slipping or you feel fatigued, you ask a great open-ended question. The other person happily does the talking for the next 3 minutes, giving your brain vital time to rest and recalibrate.
Which feeds perfectly into the overarching mindset we discussed, connecting versus impressing. If you make someone feel truly seen, actively heard, and valued in a conversation, they will walk away thinking you are the most charismatic, eloquent, fluent person they've ever met, even if you only spoke for 20% of the total time.
Absolutely. Because when your primary goal is to impress someone, you put on a performance. Your monitor hypothesis kicks into overdrive. You try to use complicated words you aren't comfortable with. You get anxious, your body language stiffens, and you lose all your natural warmth. You become a performer. But when your goal is simply to connect, you relax. You become a practitioner. You become human.
Let's ground this in reality. Let's dissect some real-life, high-pressure scenarios to see how these habits actually function in the wild. First scenario, the job interview.
The quintessential high-stress environment. So the interviewer kicks things off with the broadest prompt possible. Tell me a little bit about yourself. A non-fluent approach is to ramble for 10 minutes chronologically through your entire resume.
Boring.
Right. The fluent structure, however, involves a tight 3-part response, a brief professional summary, a statement of genuine passion, and a natural bridge to the specific role.
What does that sound like?
For example, I've spent the last 6 years in product marketing, primarily in the tech sector. But what I really enjoy, what gets me excited, is the intersection of user data and creative storytelling, which is actually the exact challenge that drew me to this specific role at your company.
It is so clean, it is purposeful, it shows passion, and it immediately connects the speaker's historical data to the interviewer's current needs. It's a perfect bridge. Okay, second scenario, networking. Let's look at an example with two professionals. Let's call them David and Lena. They are standing awkwardly by the coffee station at a conference. David asks Lena what brings her to the event. She mentioned she runs a startup focused on community solar power projects.
Okay, solar power.
Now, David knows nothing about solar power. A poor communicator would just say, oh, cool, and stare at their shoes, letting the conversation die. But David bridges. He says, that sounds fascinating. I imagine that's a complex industry. What is the absolute biggest hurdle you're running into right now?
Notice the brilliant pivot David made there. He took a highly abstract technical topic that he knew nothing about solar energy policy and immediately pivoted into a universal, open-ended question about Lena's personal experience of overcoming hurdles.
He brought it back to the human element.
Exactly. He invited her to tell a story. He didn't try to impress her with fake knowledge. He sought genuine connection.
And finally, the third scenario, online meetings. A junior team member realizes they need to push back on a deadline dictated by a senior manager. If they are too blunt, they sound insubordinate. If they are too timid, the team gets crushed by the workload.
A delicate balance.
So they use those diplomatic, assertive chunks we discussed earlier. They say, looking at the data, from my perspective, the testing phase is a bit too tight to ensure quality. I'd strongly suggest we push the launch back by 1 week. It's authoritative, it references data, but it remains collaborative. But let me ask you this, because this is the nightmare scenario for so many learners. How do you recover if you totally, completely freeze up during one of these high-stakes moments? You're talking to a VP, your mind suddenly goes entirely blank, and every word of English just evaporates from your brain. Your heart stops. What do you do?
First of all, recognize that this happens to absolutely everyone, including native speakers. The brain just misfires. The absolute best, most reliable fallback strategy is to immediately deploy the bridging or clarifying questions we just talked about.
Pivot away.
If you freeze, you do not need to suddenly invent a brilliant, profound statement to save the conversation. You just gracefully shift the spotlight back onto them. You say, before I share my thoughts, I'm really curious about your take on what we just discussed. Could you say a bit more about how you see the timeline? Or, if the topic is dead, you pivot. To shift gears for just a moment, what has been the most surprising part of this entire project for your team?
That's brilliant.
You ask the question, you take a slow, deep breath, and you let your nervous system physically reset while they happily answer.
That is such a profound relief to hear. You don't have to be the hero of every single sentence. You can pass the ball. Okay, so we have the mindset of connection. We have the vocabulary and the phrases. We have the conversational strategies for interviews and networking. Now we must enter the final, crucial phase, the physical reality of language. How do we physically train the mouth, the vocal cords, and the facial muscles to execute all of this smoothly?
This is where we acknowledge that speaking English is a fundamentally physical activity. Fluency is as much an athletic, muscular movement as it is a cognitive, mental exercise. The rhythm, the specific intonation, the way certain consonants bounce off each other, the way words blend together.
Yeah.
Your mouth muscles literally have to get used to these new gymnastics.
Mouth gymnastics, I like that.
Which is why highly successful learners rely on the physical training technique of imitating rhythm, commonly known as shadowing.
Shadowing. I absolutely love this concept because it treats language like music. English has a very specific underlying musical beat to it. Think about the common phrase, what are you going to do? When you write that down on a piece of paper, it looks like 6 distinct, separate, equally important words. But in natural, fluid speech, the unstressed words get mashed and blended together. The music of it changes. It becomes, what are you going to do?
Exactly. And if you only ever practice English by reading it silently in a textbook or doing written grammar exercises, your mouth will try to pronounce all 6 words perfectly and evenly. What are you going to do? And you'll sound stiff and robotic. Shadowing is the physical therapy that trains your muscles out of that rigidity.
Let's walk through the mechanics of the 5-step shadowing method because it's something anyone can start doing today. Step 1, you choose a short audio clip. We're talking 30 to 60 seconds maximum of someone speaking natural, unscripted English, a clip from a podcast, a YouTube interview, or a TED Talk.
Right, keep it short.
Step 2, you listen to that clip once, completely silently. Don't try to understand every word, just absorb the music, the peaks, and the valleys of their tone. Step 3, you listen again, but this time you speak along simultaneously with the recording. You try to perfectly match their tone, their rhythm, where they pause, where their pitch goes up. You become their vocal shadow.
And step 4 is crucial. While you are shadowing, temporarily ignore the meaning of the words. Don't worry if you don't know what a specific vocabulary word means. Just focus entirely on the physical sound and the movement of your mouth.
Just the mechanics.
Right. And step 5, you repeat this exact same 60-second clip for several days in a row.
It really is identical to a musician practicing their scales thousands of times before a major concert. You practice the physical movements of the language in a safe, low-stakes environment in your bedroom, your car, so that when you are under immense pressure on a stage or in a boardroom, your physical body just takes over. You don't have to consciously think about where your tongue needs to go behind your teeth to make the sound. The muscle memory just handles the mechanics for you.
It all ultimately comes back to the bedrock habit of consistency. Building linguistic confidence brick by brick, day by day. Doing the physical reps, even when it's repetitive, even when it's not glamorous. And to help put all of this theory into tangible action, there's a brilliant 7-day fluency challenge that I highly recommend everyone try. It's a week-long immersion sprint.
Let's walk through the daily plan, because this is where the theoretical rubber meets the practical road.
I love a good challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, day 1 is setting the baseline. You take out your phone, hit record, and you film an unedited 2-minute video of yourself speaking English. Talk about your day, your goals, whatever. The rule is, don't stop. Don't correct yourself, just speak. It might feel incredibly awkward and uncomfortable, but you need this raw starting point.
Day 2 is all about the physical mechanics. Shadowing. You take a 60-second audio clip of a native speaker and you do the physical mouth workout we just discussed.
Wow.
Train the muscles. Day 3. You have a full conversation in English. With a friend, a language exchange partner on Zoom, or honestly, even just talking to yourself out loud in the mirror, the focus is entirely on connection, not perfection. Try to use circumlocution if you get stuck.
Day 4. We bring in the written word to solidify the mental pathways. You write a journal entry about a recent professional challenge completely in English. By doing this, you are forcing your brain to process complex, nuanced emotions directly in the target language.
Day 5 is deep input. You sit down and watch 20 minutes of an English TV show or documentary with absolutely no subtitles. You force your brain to rely on context clues, and during those 20 minutes, you write down 5 new phrases you hear. Again, not single isolated words, but full functional phrases.
Day 6. You deploy the SPAR story framework. You sit down and craft a tight 2-minute narrative about a challenge you overcame in your life: situation, problem, action, result. You practice saying it out loud until the transitions feel smooth and natural.
And finally, Day 7, the culmination. You set up your phone and you record yourself again speaking for 2 minutes, perhaps delivering your SPAR story. Then you watch it back to back with the video from day 1. The psychological boost you get from seeing tangible physical progress in your flow and confidence in just one single week is phenomenal. It proves to you undeniably that fluency isn't some rare genetic trait you are born with. It is simply the inevitable result of focused, consistent action.
It's proof of your own capability, and it's incredibly empowering.
Okay, let's unpack everything we've journeyed through today, because we have covered the entire landscape of what it actually means to communicate successfully.
We truly have. And if there is one overarching, unavoidable theme to take away from all of this, it is that fluency is a buildable, learnable skill. It is forged through brave, beautifully imperfect moments. It means dropping the monitor hypothesis and firing the editor in your head.
Get rid of them.
It means training your brain to think directly in English rather than translating. It means having the confidence to slow down, using simple, emotionally resonant words, relying on chunking and phrases rather than isolated vocabulary, asking brilliant questions to connect with others, and doing the daily physical, muscular work of shadowing.
Your English is a work in progress. It always will be. And that is a beautiful thing. It means you are growing. But before we officially wrap up, I know you always have a final, slightly provocative thought to leave us with, something to mull over as we go about our day.
I do. And if we connect all of this mechanical and psychological work to the bigger picture of who we are, it raises a profoundly interesting question about human identity. Think about this. A growing body of psychological studies suggests that the language we speak can actually subtly alter our personality. When you finally step fully into your English fluency, when you stop translating and start actually feeling the weight of the words, you aren't just translating your native self. You might actually be discovering a brand new, highly confident facet of your identity. Because of the direct nature of English, you might find that you are more assertive or more pragmatic or more expressive in English than you are in your native tongue. So the question is, who is your English self? It's a fascinating psychological journey, and it is absolutely worth finding out.
Wow, your English self. That actually gives me goosebumps. Think about who that person is, stepping out of the shadows of the monitor hypothesis, ready to truly connect with the world. Remember, the real difference between those two people in the job interview wasn't their grammar, it was their courage to communicate authentically. If this deep dive helped you, please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.